And then you're going to be comfortable with the fact that, although, by the way, I also have really big leagued you, really taken the three-sided chalkboard. I've got a three-sided one. It's a lot of real estate to cover to get over to it, but I've got a three-sided chalkboard. And this is what I wanted to come over to this chalkboard to talk to you about. If you were only paying cursory attention to this election, you might think it's about Big Bird and binders and bayonets and Bain Capital and bad guys. It's pretty good alliteration, right? You might think it's about that stuff, but it's not. And I know the Real News viewers don't think it is. They know it's about issues. So we need to revisit this concept. What issues will we be voting on tomorrow? What issues are of most importance? And there's no shortage of issues we can put on this chalkboard to talk about that this country is facing, whether or not it's the fiscal cliff coming up in just a few months, where we have $720 billion made up of tax increases and spending cuts that we have to figure out. Whether or not it's a budget deal, $16 trillion in debt, you know, the creditors are going to come calling sooner rather than later. Tax reform, entitlement reform. You know, Superstorm Sandy's got people talking about climate change. Is that going to be an issue that we need to talk about politically? And of course, how about foreign policy issues? 60,000 troops in Afghanistan. Are they coming home in 2014? Iran. Is Al-Qaeda on the run? All of these are issues that we will be voting on come tomorrow. But what I want to offer to you is let's take a second to look at what these two guys' agenda might be. Now, agendas are driven not so much out of desire, but often out of circumstances, about events, about things that presidents have to deal with. And whether or not we have a President Obama or a President Romney, I think the number one thing they're going to be dealing with on that agenda is the fiscal cliff. This $400 and something billion in tax increases next year and $250 billion in spending cuts. The question is, on these agendas, how they deal with them. Over here with President Obama, this is going to be centered on, you know, the expiration of the Bush tax cuts and making sure we don't extend those for people making over $250,000, you know, millionaires. Over here, Romney, you assume is going to center his fiscal cliff proposal around extending all of the Bush tax cuts and hopefully some spending cuts, bringing us to, which is almost like a sub-issue, dealing with the budget. What will President Romney's budget proposal look like? Will it look something like Paul Ryan has offered to us when he was in the House, or I know he still is, but when he was putting together his own budget proposal as opposed to Romney's? And President Obama, in an off-the-record interview in Iowa with the Des Moines Register, he said he'd pursue a budget compromise that had $2.50 in spending cuts to every dollar in tax revenues. So these are things they'll be concentrating on, and I'd offer to you this. President Obama, in that same Iowa interview, said he'd also focus on immigration. This would be on his top 3 list. Now, if it's a President Romney, what you're going to see here is him focusing on Obamacare, making sure it's not implemented through, I think, what you're going to see, whatever means possible. But while we look at these issues and how they fit into agendas, there's one thing I want you to remember. It's principles. Because we need to know who these guys are. Principles equal priorities equal to who these guys are. And if opportunity is any question and history, President Obama, I would suggest he's going to pursue something like a carbon cap and tax trade, carbon climate change. You've seen New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg endorse President Obama because of this issue after Superstorm Sandy. I think these, you cannot overlook principles. Now, SC, we got to think about issues. We know that. We can't just deal with Big Bird and such. What do you think? Principles, issues, what's going to wind up on these two guys' agenda? What are we going to be voting on that they're actually going to be enacting?
Well, first of all, let me just say, I don't know how you use a three-sided chalkboard but only use one side. This seems a huge waste of opportunity.
Well, I don't like you picking on me from so far away.